May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts gathered here today be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Today we do celebrate Transfiguration Sunday. Transfiguration, this event that's recorded in 3 of our Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, a very unique event, a very different type of event, and a very kind of, in some ways, a mysterious type of event. That Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on this high mountain, on this place to pray, as Luke records for us, and there something happens. He's transformed. Jesus is transfigured, and what we see, or what they see, is the holiness of God, and see Jesus as being fully God. And there appears Moses and Elijah, and that they were talking with Jesus. A cloud comes and covers them, and we hear the voice of the Father. And there is a lot of things in this text that refer back to the Old Testament, that remind people of all the promises that God had made up until this point. And for each of the gospel writers, this is the point at which then Jesus fixes his eyes on Jerusalem, to go to the cross, knowing what it lies before. And so this is that kind of transition point. And all kinds of things are happening here. All kinds of clues are being said here to kind of lead us to seeing Jesus as the one who is both fully man and fully God. Now, out of those kind of mysterious things that happen, there is something that is very, very clear, and those are the words that are spoken by the Father. As that cloud enveloped them, as they were afraid, the Father then speaks to them, and he says, "This is my Son, my chosen one. Listen to him." We may wonder, what did the bright light and the dazzling clothes mean? Why Moses? Why Elijah? Why did he pick Peter, James, and John? Why did all these events happen? But here, in these words, is crystal clear what the Father wants us to know about Jesus. Jesus is the Father's Son. He is part of the Trinity. He is the chosen one, the one that had been promised of old. And he gives a command. Listen to him. Listen to Jesus. Maybe he's preparing his disciples because he knows the path ahead is going to be a difficult one. But here he says, listen to him. Listen to Jesus. So, who are you listening to? Listening is an important thing that we have in our lives. We listen to the things that are around us. We listen to the people that are in our lives. We listen to the people who are in authority in our lives. We listen to the people that we care about in our lives. There are all kinds of things that we listen to. In fact, this world is filled with all kinds of competing voices. Everybody wants us to listen to them. That's the whole idea of ad campaigns. They want us to listen to them. The whole idea of campaigning in politics, they want us to listen to them. The whole idea of teachers as they teach, to listen to them. Those who are in authority, to listen to them. There are competing voices. And sometimes it feels like there are lots of competing voices. It almost gets to a point where it's like we can't even make heads or tails of all the different voices that are out there. So who do we listen to? But not only those other competing voices all around us, there's also the voices inside of us. We've talked about this as an echo chamber in our culture, that what happens here is that those things that we want, that we desire, that we think are true, those are the only things that we tend to listen to, and it becomes that echo chamber. We filter everything else out. And at first that sounds good, that we're focused on just the right thing, but oftentimes we know that it will also filter out other things that maybe we need to hear. Things that might challenge us. Instead of only focusing on the things that we think that we need, that's what an echo chamber does, we miss out on all those other things around us that we need to hear, that are important to hear. And so we have all kinds of these competing voices with outside of ourselves and even inside of ourselves. So again, these words, "This is my Son, my chosen one, listen to him," should make us pause, to make us recognize something important is going on here. when God the Father says, listen to him. You see, there's only one other time in the Gospels that we hear the Father speak like this. And it was in Jesus' baptism, and he said the same thing. That this is my chosen one, my beloved one. Except here he adds, listen to him. Listen to him. With all the competing voices out there and all the competing voices within us, we need to listen to Jesus. I really like this illustration. It's based on the verse from Romans 10:17. So faith comes by hearing, and hearing from the word of Christ. And thinking about that for a moment, that faith, that thing that allows us to trust in Jesus, comes by hearing, by listening. And what we listen to, well, it, as I see in this illustration here, it actually shapes our lives. You could say it this way: you are what you listen to. What you listen to influences your life. What you put priority in listening to is something that is important to you. And what you listen to can shape your life. And there are all kinds of good voices out there that shape our lives. We think of our parents or our teachers or our spiritual leaders. Those are voices that we need to listen to that are important, and they shape our lives. But here we have this narrowing down to the most important voice. All these other voices need to be informed by this voice. It is the voice of Jesus, who truly is God in our lives. And so when we listen to his voice, well, we can follow after him. You see, we're called to listen to Jesus. Why? Because Jesus tells us what we need to hear. Not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. The rest of the world is willing to tell us what we want to hear. They want to grab our attention, and they'll say anything to get our attention. But when Jesus speaks, he's not after that. He's after telling us the truth. Jesus tells us even the hard truths, the realities of our life, the things that we face around us, and the path in this world that is difficult because of sin. And so to follow Jesus is to listen to him, even when it may be difficult. You see, his path isn't all sunshine and rainbows. His path leads to death. You see, this story is preparing the disciples and you and me to see where Jesus is going, that he's going to Jerusalem to suffer and to die. And he does not hide that. In fact, in all of the Gospels, right around this text, Jesus is very clear, and he says, I'm going to Jerusalem to die. Yes, to rise again, but also to die, to face these difficult things. The world and even our inner self is always focused on our wants, our desires. We don't want hard things. We want to put those things away. And so we need to listen to something that's going to tell us the truth, even the hard truth. And so we need to listen to Jesus. Jesus calls us to listen to him. The Father says, listen to him, because he tells us exactly what we need. Jesus doesn't lie to us like the world sometimes does. Jesus doesn't try to manipulate us as the world tries to do often to us. He doesn't tell people what they want to hear. He tells them what they need to hear. And why? Well, Jesus does all this because he loves and cares for us. He knows that, hiding the truth is not going to be good for us. Even if that truth is hard, even if that truth is going to hurt us, he ultimately knows that it is for our good. And so saying these hard things, that's listening to Jesus, who will say them in such a way that, they change our lives. He tells us the truth. Even if we don't like the truth, he tells us the truth. The world doesn't want us to hear that, but Jesus does. And he does this because he cares for us. He wants us to have a relationship with him. He wants us to know that our sin has broken that relationship and that there are difficult things because of that. But he also wants us to know that he loves and cares for us, that he is always there for us. And he wants us to listen to him, to listen to his words, to listen to Jesus. May we do that in this Lenten season and all the days of our life, to listen to Jesus.